Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale as well as the latest episode of Deadly Class. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time I'm going to start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Riverdale, you can skip what I say about this week's episode of Deadly Class. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Riverdale. So a lot of interesting things went down. We should break down. Obviously, there's the whole situation of Gladys versus Veronica. We see that situation escalating more because Hiram is back and everything, but he realizes a lot of his operation. It's like things are kind of going sideways. What about all the drugs and stuff? It's like, oh, that had to be burned and stuff because the feds were on the way. That was a story that Veronica and Hermione had come up with, had to, cover their bases. But the fact of the matter, it's kind of interesting because even when it was all said and done, you could definitely tell Hiram had hesitations about believing Hermione because, later on, he's kind of like, oh, she's not going to be involved with everything. Like, when he had to sit down with Gladys and everything, it seemed like he was like, oh, she's not going to be involved in everything because he knows he can't trust her anymore. So, but, there's this game of Gladys is like, oh, so either you help me out, telling Veronica, hey, let me stay ahead of the game, or either get your dad completely out of the way, or I'm gonna tell him about what your mom did and she's most likely going to get killed. And Veronica tried to turn it on her and be like, oh, I'm gonna tell Jughead the truth. It's like, yeah, Jughead might be pissed or whatever, but the fact of the matter is he won't kill me. On the other hand, your dad is very likely to kill your mom. So it's just shows you how cold-hearted Gladys is. It's even interesting because there's a line from Hiram about how she kind of, I forget what his exact wording was. It was almost like he was saying she squirmed her way back into town, almost like she kind of fled town before. Because that is something that's so interesting. Because for the longest time, I was under the impression the reason why Gladys left and she took Jelly Bean with her was the whole oh, I can't be around FP and this whole serpent's thing. But it seems because she's a former serpent and everything herself. So part of me wonders, is the real reason why she left and everything was because she wasn't in a position of power that she wanted to be? Is there more to the situation that FP's not really telling Jughead about kind of the family issues? Maybe she was very wanted power and position. Maybe we kind of I'm going to be bouncing all over the place, so I do apologize, but maybe it's kind of similar to Tony. Maybe it's kind of a repeat of how that kind of happened in the past, maybe just because now that we see that she's a criminal person herself, it's so why would she have issues with FP? I mean, they never said that was the reason why she left. I just assumed, because also at the same time, she never wanted Jughead around her. I guess it would have been a reminder of she's trying to move on with her new life, everything's good. But it's now we see no, she's up to criminal stuff too. So what's the issue? It's got to be the fact that she wanted something of her own without having to worry about the serpents or, because, even the serpents in FP have their morals about certain lines they won't cross, doing the whole drug thing. That's something they would never do. And the fact is that we see that Gladys is trying to get into that. That's what this is all about. For her, she's making it seem like she's come back for her family and everything, but it's all because it's she feels that this is the ripe time to come in and snatch everything up because Riverdale's in dismay. The fact is Hiram's in the condition he was in. Basically, his empire's basically crumbled. She's there to pick up the pieces to kind of do what she needs to do. And it's sad that, because once again, her and, JB are going to be manipulating, both FP and Jughead in that regard. Even to the point she's suggesting, hey, join up with the Goonies. It's and Jughead's I don't want to, but hey, tries to. Turns out, hey, they're in dismay too. A lot of them ended up joining the Gargoyles. Or Jughead goes to them, and it turns out they're kind of off their rockers a little bit because they're oh, no, Griffins and Gargoyles is more than a game. They're it's more than just it being off. It's not like they just got addicted to the game and stuff like that, and they're playing make-believe and stuff like that. They're kind of turning into a situation very much like Ethel, but it seems even more dangerous. That the fact is that they are willing to... for them, it's so interesting because it's all about ascension for them and stuff like that. And it's the Gargoyle King is still alive, which begs the question: who is playing that role if Tall Boy is dead? Which I always kind of figured he wasn't the Gargoyle King, and I guess that's kind of the whole point of anyone can wear the mask. It's not about who's under the mask. It's all about what the symbol and the mask of the Gargoyle King represents. So. But then Gladys shows up, which I'm curious, how she was able to convince the Gargoyles to join her side, the ones who are former ghoulies, which I didn't even bring that up too, though. It is kind of interesting because I was wondering for a long time, it's like, where are the ghoulies? What happened to them now that Penny's gone out of the picture? And it's like, lo and behold, it's just basically scattered to the wind because they didn't have any leaders to take over. So like they kind of got sucked up into other things, in particular, Griffins and Gargoyles and stuff like that. So, but it's like, what did Gladys do? Like, what did she promise? Like, is she taking advantage of this Griffin and Gargoyles thing? Does she know more about what's going on than anything else? I mean, for her, it didn't seem like she doesn't care. I mean, that whole thing is leaving everyone off balance and putting her in a position where she can kind of just come in and just, work her magic, So, and she's trying to convince Jughead it's all about, like, position. It's like, hey, you build up your army back up because all the girls left the Serpents to join up with the Pretty Poisons. And, it's interesting because Tony's like, oh, no, I deserve to be in the Serpents as queen. But Jughead won't fork over that crown to her. It's like, that belongs to Betty. And he's like, because for Tony, it's like, I'm a legacy. And it's like, I mean, technically, doesn't Betty count as a legacy? Her mom was in the Serpents, but I guess it's like, no, like, you got to be a long-standing tradition amongst the Serpents and stuff like that. But the fact is, I think Betty's kind of proven herself multiple times, to be rightfully deserving of the crown. But for Tony, it's just she feels like she's owed. So she has no plans on joining the Serpents again, And it's kind of interesting because we see a little discontent. And I figured this would come up eventually, but I didn't expect it in this way because Tony had to set the record straight. It's like, are the poisons mine or yours? And Cheryl was like, of course they're yours. It's like, okay then. So I better not ever find out that you did something like this without my permission first. It's like, whoa. I mean, that's the problem, For one, I'm thinking like Tony might end up letting that power go to her head a little bit. It might, Cheryl probably did this because it's like, oh, you're the woman I love, so I'm, I want to give you everything that you want, desire. But who knows, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it's like when Tony feels like she's owed this, that might start kind of changing her perspective. And it might not just be love. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they're going to be able to separate it. But I get the feeling like we might see a shift where Tony just goes full blown enjoying the power too much and like, I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what Cheryl ends up doing in the long run, because Cheryl can't use. It's kind of almost like Tony tore her down, being like, "Don't use this for your vendettas and stuff like that." That's all this was. This wasn't about you trying to show them up. And she still, I guess, stands by the fact is that she's going to put Jughead in his place, and he seems so interesting because it's almost like you're berating Cheryl for it seems like something that you're about to do yourself, because it seems like you're going to make a point to get revenge against Jughead, because it's like, how can you kick me out of something that I've been a part of longer than you have, So it's definitely going to be interesting. I mean, considering the fact is they were friends, and now you see that divide being created between them, and I feel like them being on opposing sides like this, especially with his mom whispering in his ear like that Jughead's going to just kind of go steeper and steeper until it turns into a full-blown war between both groups, essentially. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what goes on there, because you also had the whole thing of like, oh yeah, the whole thing about Hiram continues running the prison, and then Gladys can run the drugs and stuff like that, but it's like, oh, get FP to like give me more criminals, so it's like I can make more money that way with the more people in the prison. She's like, yeah, sure, whatever. So it's kind of like, once again, Jelly Bean's got her dad wrapped around her finger. So it's kind of sad that it almost seems like they don't regret using their family to get what they want. I guess because in their eyes it's kind of like, in the long run it doesn't matter. Because it's like, I'm curious, like, when it's all said and done, does Gladys plan to stick around and, like, enjoy all this power with her family? Say, hey, we're reunited. Yes, I'm taking advantage of the situation, but it doesn't mean we can't be happy and healthy and powerful. Or will she kick them both to the curb when it's all said and done? Will she come in, try and swoop in and take the Serpents for herself when they've amassed all this power, when they're kind of the most powerful force in Riverdale? Will she snatch the throne from Jughead? Because that's going to be interesting, because it's like with like the Pretty Poisons and everything, I'm assuming Gladys is going to gut them and then like take the remnants of it and add it back into the Serpents, or we might see her kind of take up the position of taking over the Pretty Poisons or something like that. I don't know. Like you're never sure when exactly Gladys will strike. I mean, I feel like a Serpent is very an apt description of her, just the way she kind of, how she's going about this thing. So that in itself is interesting. What's also interesting is when it all comes down to it, like Hiram is like, oh, I called a governor, and it turns out you made a heavy contribution. It's like, so what were you up to, Hermione, while I was out of the picture? But then Veronica tells the truth to a certain extent. It's like, hey, I'm the one who burned your drugs. I did it for you and our family. What's interesting now, though, is that she owes Hermione, Hermione owes Veronica for, taking that hit for her, because once again, it's like Veronica knows it's like if something happened, like Dad won't do anything to me. He might actually do something to Mom. But there's that. But there's also the fact is that it's like, oh, Veronica also owes him like the $75,000 from the drugs, which on top of that, she also owes Gladys too. So now she's in such a compromised position, because I'm sure Gladys is still going to be like, oh yeah, fork over some of that information. Even though we made that deal, I still want to screw over your dad in some shape or form. I doubt it, because it's like he's out of her way, but to completely take control of everything, she probably will try. I don't know, maybe she'll leave Hiram to his whole little prison, because it's like, you do your thing, I don't care. As long as it keeps you preoccupied and out my way, who cares? We'll see in the end. But I'm definitely interested to see. Like I said, you can definitely tell that Hiram is like looking at Hermione like, yeah, I know there's more to this story that I'm just not figuring it out yet. But we'll see in the long run what ends up happening in that regard. You have the whole farm situation of... It's interesting because Betty tried to go to Kevin for help, and lo and behold, Kevin's actually mixed up in this a little bit, because Evelyn was there for him during the whole Moose situation. I guess Archie should consider himself lucky, because he hasn't been hit up with this whole situation. I mean, in the long run, maybe he is. That might be the situation that we might see with this whole thing of like the farm ends up taking away every friend and every person that Betty cares about, like to the point they all kind of get brainwashed, but she's like the only one willing to see it, because Alice and Polly are so far gone, they're not willing to see any other side of it. But like there's this whole baptism she's going through, and Betty tries to be okay with it until it's like, oh yeah, you also have to sign these forms that say that we're not legally liable, that the fact is if you got super injured or killed, and it's like, wait, what? But her mom is so blinded by it, she wasn't willing to see it. And Betty looks up and hears from all these different people who are from the farm who ended up leaving. She ended up talking to a lady, but later on when she tries to contact the lady, she wasn't able to get in contact with her. It's most like a situation of like they probably found out and took care of her, and it's like, jeez. What's interesting though is, and Betty didn't comment on it, it's like, oh, like with all of this, it's like, it's all about the baptisms, it's about ascension. You have to cross the line of death to kind of and come back and be reborn. And it's like, but ascension, it's like the fact is that they're willing to use that same word too. It kind of goes back to what I've always thought, like the farm has to be connected to this Griffin and Gargoyles thing, because it seems like they've made a point to make it seem like they're not connected at all, which just makes me think they're that much more connected, especially in regards of that, because the whole thing is about ascension during, Griffin and Gargoyles too, So there's got to be something there. But when Betty showed up, she was able to resuscitate her mom, but when it was all said and done, like Polly was standing there, Evelyn, like Betty was like calling an ambulance or something. And, Polly, you could tell she looked a little worried and turned to Evelyn, but none of them did anything. It's like, what would they have done? Because even Betty had said, like, if something happens to Mom and she dies, her blood is going to be on your hands, Polly. I wonder, did this open Polly's eyes? Maybe not. It didn't open Alice's eyes the way you thought, and we're hoping it would, because it's like, oh, I've been reborn. I know what my destiny is and everything. I saw everything I needed to see. I'm going to sell this house, and we could be together. You, me, Polly, the twins, and Edgar, all and the farm, all together, living together. And it's just kind of like, Betty's just looking, because it's just like the more she tries, it's just the further and further her mom slips away from her, and this is just driving her further and further towards her dad too, because her dad might be the only person she feels like she can turn toward with this whole situation. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how that all progresses. But getting back to what I was saying, like, obviously, like, Riverdale's in a place where it's like everyone's got their issues. Like, if you're not getting dragged into Griffin and Gargoyles, you're being dragged into the farm potentially, as we saw with Kevin. So it's definitely going to be interesting, because like we might see those two worlds collide in that regard, or just kind of like in the long run it all kind of worked out, so. Because like I said, with Archie being in the state that he's in, he seems like he's prime pickings for it. So, well, we'll see. But on the other side of things, we had Archie training for fights and stuff like that, boxing with Keller. But, Archie wants to get into a fight because he wants to prove himself. Because for him, it's like fighting is the only thing that kind of makes him feel good. Because it's like, it keeps him focused, lets everything else in his world kind of fall away, you know? But he meets up with Elio, takes a deal to dive in a fight. Keller kind of tries to talk him out of it, and even Josie was able to finally convince him, which is like, it's nice to have Josie in his corner. I mean, the sad thing is, it's like Veronica was always in his corner. She would have done that too, but it's like, I don't know, it is nice that, you know, at the very least, like, Archie has someone in his corner keeping him from, like, falling too far off the edge again. And for him, it's like, because for him, this is all the purpose of getting back on the edge, giving himself something where he can stay focused and put all his energy and efforts into to keep himself, you know, from slipping again. And it's so interesting because Josie's like, the fact is you're worth so much more than this. The fact of the matter is, like, saying that, yeah, you've been dealt a lot of bad hands, but the fact of the matter is there are no shortcuts in all of this. Like, if you're going to find your way, you need to, has to be on your own. You can't try and take no shortcuts. It's not going to give you the resolution you essentially want from it. So it was just kind of an interesting thing. When it came down to the fight, though, with Keller's help, like, Archie killed that fight. He did a very good job. It's kind of sad, you know, especially in that final round when, like, he was going rapid fire, dude. That was pretty badass. But even Keller's like, keep your head up, Archie. You obviously won that. So luckily, it kind of worked out better, because if he had won that fight, Elio probably would have come after him later on and would have been kind of basically like a Daredevil situation, particularly with, like, Matt's dad and everything, kind of a similar situation in that regard. That's what I was kind of worried about. But hey, Elio got his money anyway. His champion still keeps his reputation and everything. But I'm sure this puts a lot of people's eyes on Archie. The fact is that he put up such a good fight. So it might kind of work out in Archie's favor either way. You see, he's a little disheartened, but I think this was the right way for things to end up. Because the fact is, no matter what, even though he lost, he put in a hell of a fight. He put in a lot of effort. The fact is that he didn't, you know, he might have lost, but he didn't, you know, lose on purpose. You know, he gave it his all. So, like I said, it's interesting. I'm really digging, like, just what, like I said, it's a relationship I just never would have ever expected. They've probably been together in the comic books, I'm sure. Because, like, I mean, like, the whole like, Veronica and Betty situation, that love triangle thing, I think that's a pretty common comic book thing, but I don't know if him and Josie being a thing have ever really been. I mean, it probably has been. I just, you know, once again, I don't really know Archie comics like that at all, you know. So, but I'm very interested to kind of see that kind of develop and what that relationship, you know, grows into, you know. Like I said, a lot of interesting things went down in this episode. I'm so curious to see where the next episode takes us in going forward with all of this. And now moving on to this week's episode of Deadly Class, a great episode. A lot of interesting things we learned in this episode. In fact, there's a lot of truths that we ended up learning. So let's kind of break everything down. We learned more about the home the boys' home situation. Because obviously I thrown out that before, like, it kind of confused me because we saw that Marcus had the bomb and everything, but it didn't make sense to me. Like, but then he said that it was Chester who, you know, killed all the kids that were there. So it's like, let's backtrack a little bit. Obviously, we see more of what the conditions were like at the home, to the point that Marcus was planning his escape, and he's using the needles that they were using in the sweatshop for stuff. He's literally sticking them in the side of his mouth, piercing his skin to hide them. That was how he was sneaking them out of there. The mistress who was running the place was a terrible person. It was just a terrible place in general. Plus, he still had to also deal with the whole Chester thing every time he went back to his room. But for him, it was like his revenge against Chester, as well as he ended up taking out some of the guards. He ended up talking about the fact that he hurt some people escaping when he made his escape. When we saw this, it turns out it looked like he picked up the gun and killed one of the guards in particular. I mean, it's like they were very abusive. So, but when it came to taking down the mistress, he chose not to kill her because it's like, no, I want the truth about everything that went down here to come out. The fact of the matter is, you dying would be too easy. So he wanted to, you know, get justice in a sense. So he wanted to free all the boys and make that happen. But it turns out, as he was leaving, he didn't realize that, you know, Chester got up and he killed everyone in there. Because the sad, twisted thing about it is, and it's something we learned from Scorpio Slasher, is the fact is that, and it's kind of an interesting thing that the show does, because I think it applies to every character. Like, the show is very good at giving you, like, this tragic backstory to make you understand why each character got to where they were. They didn't necessarily 100% do that for Chester, aka Fuckface, but we now got more context because of Scorpio Slasher being like, he didn't choose to be the way he was. And then you have Marcus being like, no, he made his choices, but it's like Scorpio's like, no, the fact of the matter is he didn't choose to be raised in that boys' home. The fact of the matter is who he is now was kind of forced upon him because of his circumstances, which we learn about. The fact is his rough childhood home. That the fact is that being at that boys' home felt safer for him. No matter how messed up and abusive it was still better than being at home with his dad. His dad didn't like the fact is that he has this special attachment to dogs. And, you know, and that was his way of dealing with love. Like, he never had love or anyone to cherish and hold in his life. So that's why he chose dogs. It's actually interesting because, like, the psychology behind it is kind of like he chose a creature that couldn't talk back either. You know, it's just kind of like, let me love you and just accept me type of situation. It doesn't make it any better, but you kind of feel bad for him on a level for that. Especially when you hear that thing of him being like, oh yeah, my dad took me back there and, well, my relationship, things got a little awkward with Paul. Our relationship was never quite the same. It's like, which, you know, he didn't outright say it, but it seemed like he was insinuating his dad, you know, touched him, and it's like, Jesus. And it's like, that's what motivated him to kill his dad. So it's like, when you look at the fucked up situation he came from, you kind of understand why he kind of became the way he is. He's even sad because, like, you see, well, for one, just how messed up his mind is to the point that he's literally talking to Chico's head like a lot of the episode, which is crazy. But the fact is that he thinks by becoming this famous serial killer, he can fill that hole in his heart that he, you know, it's like, no. Like, being famous fixes everything. It's like, geez, that statement in itself is commentary on many different levels, I'm sure, within the context of this story at that time period, and even, you know, that rings true today, I'm sure, but like, he thought it would fix something inside of him, and that won't. And just to me, I think it's going to be scary when that moment happens and, you know, he blows up and just kind of like loses it because it's like, oh, it didn't get him the notoriety, it didn't make him feel better because he thought it would. And that's why he hates Marcus so much, because not only did you take a good place I had away from me, now the one thing I do have going for me, this whole serial killer thing, you took that away from me too. So like, Marcus just keeps taking and taking. It's like, you ruined my entire life. I finally had somewhere safe away from my dad. You know, it wasn't that great, but it was definitely better than my original situation. You took that all away from me. I guess that was one reason why he wanted to kill everyone else too. It's like, no, you're all going to suffer from Marcus's consequences, you know? So it's kind of like, this place I once thought of as a home, it's kind of like, I guess I gotta wipe it off the map anyway, because it's no longer the place I can call home. You know, he even goes as far as goes like, oh, me and Marcus, we were doing horseplay, you know, that was, you know, boys' home, kind of a boys will be boys type of situation is kind of how he looked at it. But it's like, Marcus took it too far, so now I gotta make him pay. It's like, jeez, dude. Like I said, the show did an interesting thing of kind of making you feel a little sympathetic for one of your villains, but it's like, because it's designed in that way to make you feel sympathetic about every character in the show in that regard. So there's a lot to digest about this episode in that, you know, the fact is that he's bringing his family along, like, because he wants his family wants to kind of get famous off of his reputation and stuff like that, so they're not the most sane of people either. I even love that dude coming in and is like, yeah, I got stabbed by one of your family members, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry for you, but he's like, you know, Chester's like, the fact is, you know, I need them on their good side, and, you know, on my good side, because once that happens, they'll be more likely to help me and stuff like that, because they think they're going to get famous off. He's like, oh, okay, well, thanks for listening to my plea. I'm like, and he says it so calmly. I love it later on when he's on the truck and everything, and Saya's running towards the truck. He's like, hey girl, can you cut me down? And he says it so nonchalantly. I love it. It's just so good. But the fact is that he even snapped at his cousin because his cousin messed everything up, because it was like, oh, to set up the murders and everything like that. Oh, good. Wait, you didn't get the signature right with the painting and the paint and stuff, and it pissed him off because it's like every little minute detail has to be the same so that, you know, it creates this profile of this serial killer, because it's like, you know, because he wants to be looked as kind of like, I guess, this meticulous killer that even the smallest details are right, because I guess he also doesn't want to take the chance someone else, like, if it's a little bit different, a little off, it doesn't have the signature there, people won't associate the kill with him, and he'd have to go like, no, that was my kill, you didn't see it, but that, you know. So that's one thought behind it too. So which, once again, shows you just how messed up Chester is. It's kind of interesting that, obviously Marcus, one or two of the people involved in this is Saya and Billy, but he did go to Saya because Saya is the only one who knows the truth about, something he hasn't shared with anyone. At least I don't think he has. It's a whole aspect of like, he didn't kill all those boys. Like the reputation that he has for that boys' home, not all of that belongs to him. Mainly that belongs to Chester. Saya's the only one who actually knows that truth. And obviously helping out with this and the whole Maria situation and getting Chico's body back is about covering their own asses. So that's her main reasoning for it. But I think there's also the aspect of she does just simply want to help Marcus too, so... But it is also about helping Maria, even though they kind of have their complicated relationship right now. That's still one of her best friends, I'm sure. So, which, speaking of Maria, she had a very interesting episode. Because obviously she's falling apart more and more. I'm curious, is she back on her medication or did she get rid of all? I think didn't she say she ended up getting rid of all her medication, or did she say she just simply stopped it? I don't remember. But that on top of all the stress of just everything. Then, Chico's dad shows up, and he doesn't believe you because you're trying to keep up this lie in front of him, but he sees through you. He sees through your heart, and so basically he gives Maria 24 hours to kind of fix things, or there's going to be an issue. But then it's like, obviously she knows the truth about herself, and obviously you can tell that, Chico's dad, he knows something's there. But obviously one of the people, from the cartel that, is at the school and everything, that was part of Chico's crew and everything, the one who kept bringing up Yukio, that dude probably told Chico's dad about what Maria wasn't acting upon. And I guess Maria can't really let anyone know that she's got her bipolar disorder situation, because I'm sure that's also going to, I doubt it, help. And it'd probably just make them look at her like she's weak, and they might look at her as damaged goods in some shape or form, and might just outright decide to get rid of her then and there. So, but Maria goes in, kills Yukio, which, to be fair, it's like, well, he was working with the syndicate to, come, in particular, he was helping out get Saya's cousins into the school to come kidnap her and kill and hurt people. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's not like he was a great person anyway. There was that innocent dude that Maria ended up killing just because he was about to scream for help and she killed him. So it seems like I said, to a certain extent, it does seem like it satisfied Chico's dad, but eventually, because I thought she was going to go in there, potentially do like a whole massacre thing and end up killing everyone. But it's like, no, she only killed 2 people, still. But what's interesting, though, is I get the feeling that this is probably going to lead to the syndicate, making a move, because they're probably going to, word's going to get out. It's like, oh, the cartel did it. Someone witnessed something. Maybe that dude that Maria thought she killed, she didn't actually kill the second dude. And so now he's going to end up saying it was this person, and so now it's going to turn into a war between the cartels and the syndicate, which is going to put Maria and Saya in the middle with all of this kind of happening, while they're still dealing with the Chico situation. It might even be the fact is that, Chico's dad might be like, oh, I might as well cut you loose just because, you didn't handle the situation the way you should have, and it's just kind of a shit show in that regard. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what goes on in that. Like I said, with them kind of caught in the middle, each with their own respective situation, her Maria's complicated situation with the cartel, as well as, Saya's whole situation with, her brother and everything going on in Tokyo. So we'll see what ends up happening in that regard. The whole Scorpio slasher thing was kind of interesting, just because, he went from scary and menacing in some moments and just kind of being a little funny, just the dialogue they ended up giving him at one point. Billy's holding on to his leash a little too much, and he's just like, give me some slack, motherfucker, we're in the city. Even making comparing Billy to Dr. Seuss, and it's like, what? Billy was so offended, but then it's like, no, he was a drunk and he was this, and Billy's like, wait, really? And he's like, yeah, the fact is he cheated on his wife when with a woman or multiple women, either one, and it was while his wife was dying from cancer. And even Billy was like, wow, that's not punk, that's just dickish. And it's like, whoa. I'm assuming the fact is they just dropped that might be 100% fabricated, but I kind of get the feeling that's probably true. It's that thing of your perception of someone versus kind of who they were, because everyone's a flawed human being, you know. So, but what I also thought was kind of interesting was like Scorpio slashers like look into Marcus, kind of understanding him better, of being like, we're kind of the same, because it's like they both kind of want to choose their targets for their particular reasons. Obviously, like, you know, there's a psychology behind why, you know, Scorpio ended up choosing the people he chose. But, you know, when it comes to Marcus, and you can say, like, for him, it's all about justice. Like, even going after Ronald Reagan is because it's like, my parents died because you cut back on funds into mental health and stuff like that, and it led to my parents dying. So it's like, to keep himself from completely going over the rails and becoming crazy, he strives for justice. And I think that kind of plays a part into, you know, the justice goes beyond just his family, but his family is like the foundation of it. And then the whole like not liking bullies and stuff like that, I think is kind of an outer rim to that foundation that kind of makes up, you know, Marcus's beliefs and morals, you know. At least that's how I see it. And also when Scorpio slash just straight up like disemboweled one of Chester's cousin, and you just literally see the guts spilling out, and he's like, ooh, that's the stuff, or something like that, as he was doing it. We didn't see him like at that last shot when they were trying to run after the truck, but I think that was probably him trying to make it. He probably ran. I mean, I feel like you might as well take advantage of that situation, because you end up going right back to being locked up at King's Dominion. But maybe he's kind of fine with that. I don't know. We'll have to see. But it was even interesting because Chester was like, oh man, meet your heroes, come on, meeting Scorpio. It's like, oh, I'm a big fan of your work and stuff like that. So that was definitely interesting. Another side of this dealt with Willie. And Willie and the Gabrielle situation I thought was kind of fascinating, because obviously it's the whole conversation about what the soul is and stuff like that. Like when you get a transplant from someone, you know, Gabrielle was like, maybe you get a little bit of their soul with it. But then, you know, even Willie being like, when he went to his dad's funeral, it was a open casket. It was like, when he looked at his dad's body, he didn't see it, because it's that whole thing of like, who you were is no longer there. When you die, it's like who you were, everything you were is no longer there. That's just some hollow shell. And for Willie, he thinks about all the stuff that his dad, you know, wanted in life. You know, his dad, because he wants his dad to be at peace, knowing that his dad kind of had a lot of regrets. And it was just kind of like, his dad loved singing and, you know, always looked to the guitar, like music, because it's something that was kind of important to him. But, you know, for Willie, I think the guilt of being the one who pulled the trigger and killed his dad, because it's like, I killed my dad, and now he'll never get to live his dreams. He'll never have those passions that he never got a chance to act upon because of me. And that guilt, I think, keeps Willie from even thinking of maybe there's something outside of all this for him. Because, like, I think the reason why he's willing to do whatever it takes for his mom, even though he's a pacifist and everything, is because for him it's like, his mom obviously knows the truth, and the guilt of, like, and the shame of her knowing the truth, I think that just pushes him to try and be someone he isn't, because it's like, I have to be this person, because it's like, I don't deserve to not be that person, because I need to be that person, because like, I'm the reason why everything kind of fell apart in our lives. I killed my dad. I took him away from me and my mom. And so, like I said, maybe there's a level of her disappointment and her like wanting to hold on to his mom for any amount of time to kind of keep her in his life. He has to become this person that she wants him to be, you know, like her. Like I said, I just think he believes he doesn't deserve it, which is kind of a sad way to kind of look at things. But, you know, I'm curious to see when the time comes, because of his need to, you know, be there for his mom. Like, his mom, will she eventually kind of basically put him in a position where he does cross the line? Will he end up killing or hurting someone and kind of breaking his current belief value and system to be what they want and need him to be? We'll kind of have to wait and see on that front. But I'm also curious to see, like, obviously when we meet up with Willie again in the next episode, will we see him in the process of doing what he's doing with his mom? Probably going to be a test to see, like, oh, how much he's changed, like, whether he's grown. They'll probably try and put him to work to get his hands dirty, because obviously that was something that was spread around, because even Chico was like, yeah, I heard that, like, every time it came to doing something dirty, you'd never do it yourself. So that rumor might be spreading back to his mom too. So it's kind of like, you need to do this to prove it to me that all this is worth it, that you're worth it, type of thing. So like I said, we'll see. And then finally, there's another side of things with Lynn and his sister Gal. The whole aspect of, like, it turns out like Gal had a son. That son was sacrificed for kind of like the greater good, in a sense of like his sacrifice led to other people having the opportunity to be risen up to be like assassins for change, essentially. You know, people who could step up and change the world. But lo and behold, Gal ends up figuring out that Lynn's daughter is actually still alive. Because it turns out this all comes back to their family obligations to the guild. It's like their grandfather made a blood pact with the guild so that everyone in their bloodline has to participate. So obviously Lynn pulled his daughter away from this, which is ironic considering the fact that he's dragging all these other kids. I guess they have no other place to go. Obviously a lot of these people are legacies, so their situations are a little bit different. But still, the fact is that you're doing all that, dragging all these people in, and lo and behold, it turns out like, hey, you're not doing the same thing for your kid. It's kind of a little there's hypocrisy behind it, and that's what pisses Gal off, because it's like, you and me were dragged into this. In particular, I was dragged into this at 8 years old. I mean, that whole conversation came up before about how, like, you know, Lynn was 18 when he got dragged in. I mean, it's still harsh, but it's like, it was definitely had to be harsher on Gal at such a young age. And now it turns out like, oh yeah, Lynn's daughter is about the same age. So I think, you know, Gal's going to do whatever it takes to bring her into the fold with all this, because it's like, for her, she's a very stickler person by the rules of like, this is our code, this is our honor. Like, you, by faking her death and all of this, you're bringing shame upon us. So what I'm wondering about the whole situation with his wife, I'm assuming like she's from a different family that made a similar obligation. So it's kind of like she has her own obligation to the guild. It's just like their daughter does, but to kind of protect them both, because if they just made the daughter disappear and like the mom was still around, she still would have had to go through that too. So to protect the two important people in his life, I think he faked both of their deaths. Is how I'm chalking that up. Because I feel like, why would you go through the trouble of hiding her as well if you didn't need to? So I think it is necessary as well, because she's probably in literally the same situation, and it kind of goes doubly for their daughter, especially if she's like from two different, you know, families that have pledged to the guild and everything, you know. So like I said, I am curious, because she is such a stickler for the rules and everything, these guidelines. What will Gal do? Will she simply just take her niece and set her up and train her? Because, like, obviously she's grown cold, whereas Lynn has grown softer. And I'm curious, what was it exactly that shifted that perspective in his mind? The whole story of like, oh, the man who killed his family and stuff like that, was that like an attempt on their lives that he dealt with ahead of time? Or is that just a lie he says to perpetuate, to kind of get students to join in like Marcus, which is kind of extra messed up once again, of like you telling people to join up with this thing that you yourself are playing by your own rules with in certain regards. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what ends up happening in the next episode with that, but along with everything else as well. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.